The sun shone brightly on the Santa Monica Pier, where laughter, music, and the smell of cotton candy filled the air. Families strolled across the wooden planks, children tugged their parents toward rides, and couples leaned against the railing watching the waves crash below. Yet amid this cheerful scene, one girl sat quietly in her wheelchair near the carousel, trying to blend in with the crowd. Marissa Hart, 19, whose life had changed forever after a car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down. She loved the pier, the spinning Ferris wheel, the guitarists playing for tips, and the salty ocean breeze made her feel alive again. But what she feared most were people's stares and the way strangers looked at her chair before they looked at her face. That day she told herself she wouldn't let fear stop her. She was going to roll along the pier by herself, buy a lemonade, and enjoy the world like everyone else. She wanted to feel normal again. Normality was short-lived. 3 young men noticed her from across the boardwalk. Loud, swaggering, clearly trying to draw attention. One wore a floral shirt with his chest puffed out and tattoos creeping down his arms. The other 2 wore faded denim vests. They shoved each other and joked crudely, but when their eyes landed on Marissa, their grins sharpened, and they closed in like predators circling prey. One leaned close and sneered, "Move." The words slashed through her like a knife. Marissa froze. She had grown used to whispers behind her back, but this was different. Loud, cruel, and public. Before she could react, the man in the floral shirt laughed and swung his boot toward her wheelchair. The impact jolted the chair, sending her teetering sideways. She gasped, one hand shooting out to steady herself, the other clutching the wheel, almost falling onto the pier planks. People nearby turned their heads, but instead of stepping forward, most looked away, and that was when her heart sank, not because of the bully's words, but because of everyone else's silence. Marissa blinked back tears, but the men weren't finished. They jeered and mocked her as though her wheelchair were a joke. "Bet you can't even get up without help." One sneered. Another laughed so hard he bent double, slapping his knee. Every word chipped away at her courage. She wanted to vanish, to roll away as fast as she could, but her arms felt heavy and frozen. Then something began to shift in the atmosphere. At first a sound, a deep, steady rumble that vibrated through the pier planks, signaling that the moment was about to change. The laughter of the bullies faltered as heads turned toward the street leading onto the pier, where one by one motorcycles rolled in, chrome glinting beneath the California sun, engines growling like thunder rolling in off the ocean. Black leather jackets, polished boots, and tattoos telling stories of hard-lived lives announced their arrival, and they came in numbers too many to count. Dozens, maybe more. The pier itself seemed to tremble as they parked, dismounted, and strode forward. A sea of bikers, men and women, old and young, all broad-shouldered, grim-faced, and carrying anger tightly coiled into silence. Their vests bore insignias, but it wasn't the patches that mattered. It was the unity, the brotherhood, the sheer force of their presence that froze the air. The bullies who had moments ago sneered with such bravado now went pale, the floral shirt man losing his mocking grin as his eyes darted left and right, desperately seeking escape, but the bikers closed in too quickly. The bustling boardwalk fell hushed. The pier became a stage, and every eye fixed on the unfolding scene. Marissa's breath caught in her throat as she watched the wall of leather and steel advance, boots striking the wooden planks in unison. At the front stood their leader, a towering man with a silver beard and calm but furious eyes. He stepped forward until he stood just feet from the bullies, then crossed his arms, his glare sharp enough to cut through bone. Behind him the bikers spread out, forming an unbreakable barrier around Marissa, a silent shield against the cruelty she had endured moments before. The bullies shuffled backward, their bravado dissolving in the face of this silent army, suddenly so small, so powerless, as though the very air around them had turned heavy with warning. No one laid a hand on them, but the message was carved into the moment. "You will not touch her again." Marissa's pulse thundered in her ears. Yet for the first time since the accident, she didn't feel weak or pitted or invisible. She felt protected, important, seen. The bikers didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to, because their sheer presence shifted the balance of power, silencing cruelty, without a single blow. The pier, which moments earlier had echoed with cruel laughter, now buzzed with awe. People who had looked away now stood frozen, wide-eyed, some even lifting their phones to capture the scene. Realizing they had become the villains of their own show, the bullies stumbled off, muttering curses, their shoulders hunched in shame. And then came the moment that etched itself forever into Marissa's heart. The silver-bearded leader stepped forward, his stern face softening as he crouched to meet her eyes at her level. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low, gravelly, yet threaded with profound kindness. Tears welled up in Marissa's eyes, and she could only nod, unable to speak. Around her, the bikers smiled, some giving her thumbs up, others resting their hands gently on her wheelchair in quiet solidarity. They didn't see her as broken, or as a burden. They saw her as someone worth standing up for. The Ferris wheel spun lazily in the background. The ocean breeze carried the tang of salt through the air, and on that sunlit California afternoon, an army of bikers turned a scene of cruelty into one of unforgettable compassion. The crowd erupted into applause. Children clapped, parents smiled with relief. Strangers leaned in to touch Marissa's shoulder, but none of it compared to the warmth blooming in her chest, knowing that, at last, the world had answered cruelty with courage. In the days that followed, Marissa's story spread far beyond the pier as videos of the moment when the bikers surrounded her went viral, transforming into a global symbol of protection and compassion. Across the world, people shared the clips, leaving comments filled with their own experiences, times when someone had stood up for them, or regrets of moments when they had failed to stand up for someone else. What began as Marissa's story grew into something bigger, a reminder of what humanity can look like at its very best when courage rises against cruelty. And before we end, I have one simple request. Drop a comment below with the words, *kindness protects. If you believe the world needs more people who stand up against cruelty. Let this be the message we carry forward together.